What's up, strength coaches? Welcome back to another episode of the Cheeky Midweeky, where we are making strength and conditioning not boring anymore, and we do that by highlighting the practitioners in the field. If you like the show, go ahead, hit like and subscribe. Kyle, thanks for coming on the show, brother. I greatly appreciate you being here. How's the day been?
It's been good. It's been pretty busy so far, but thanks for having me.
What happened earlier to make it busy? What you got going?
We just got a lot of guys coming back in, so doing a little testing on them, and then a big morning lift group. So it was good.
What is everybody listening to? We just jump right into it. So what does the testing look like? What were you guys doing?
So for our testing, they go through a series of movement screen as well as our jump assessment test. So it doesn't take that long in particular, but when we have a lot of bodies, then it gets a little lengthy, and combine that with a couple of lifting groups. So what we do with our jump assessment is we get a power output jump where it's very simple. We use output sports with our band just around the foot. And so we do a power jump or a jump assessment with a vertical jump, and then an RSI assessment called their 10-5 test. So those two simple components can feed us a lot of data that we utilize.
How, you talked about having limited number of staff to work with you. How do you handle that? Because we have listeners out there that they want to test, right? And but they're limited by staff. So what's your recommendation to be able to get it done, valid and reliable research, but limited resources?
Yeah. Find what is most important to you. And so with us, we found those two tests, being a vertical jump or a power-based jump, whatever you want to call it, as well as an RSI, being the most efficient and the most useful test for us. And so with that, the efficiency in mind, we can get through every operator in under 1 minute, which is huge for us. And so we can get, a great amount of data and a lot of it across, an entire year's span. And it's very, very efficient. And so that's the critical part, because I've been here and I've been other places where we've had very limited staff or very limited time, and it's all about efficiency.
All right. You just said the word that everybody's going to be like, wait a minute, you said operative, right? Like, go ahead and fill people in on where you are. Again, everything high level, respecting any privacy of you and your athletes and everything, but fill everybody in on where you're at, your journey, so that way they can start to understand you a little bit more, because you and I have been communicating for quite some time now.
Yep. So I'm currently working with Naval Special Operations. I've been here for 3.5 years, and it's been good. I got here in the fall of 2020. Prior to this, I was with the Miami Marlins organization for, I guess, collectively about 3 years. Prior to that, I was with the Florida Panthers hockey for just around a little over 2 seasons. And prior to that, I was at IMG Academy for almost 3 years, working with football, track, and baseball.
I mean, so anybody listening, this is another Costa connection. I'm going to call it the KC or something like that. Like the Costa. I got to come up with something creative, but another strength coach going, you were high school. It's hard to say IMG's high school, right?
Great.
But my point is, like, you went from that sector to pro to now in the tactical, right? Like, and it's growing, right? Like, it's just, I'm super fascinated by it. And I just want to hear from somebody that's been in, pro sport, essentially pro sport at IMG, and then with different world. Like, I want to hear your perspective on why you did it. And again, like, what you would recommend, because we're almost writing history as we're going about it, right? Like, these coaches, they need to know more about it. You know what to expect with the path in high school and college, but like, this is just uncharted territory. Like, help out as many people as possible right now.
Right. And it's a very fun time to be in the tactical setting and be entering in the tactical setting, because like you just said, it's uncharted territory. It's uncharted waters that you kind of get to navigate with your own compass. So I got to a point, I tell you, back in 2020, so COVID hit, and you're able to really take a step back. And at that point in my life, I was, more or less getting worn out of 1-year contracts after 1-year contracts, and kind of, the hockey world or in the baseball world, it's at the end of that season, you're holding your breath and wondering, okay, hey, am I going to be here? And regardless of how good a job you think you did, the guy that's making that decision might not be the best informed guy about what you do. Right. And so when I was able to take a step back and kind of look as far as a career longevity approach, that's when I, started to reach out to more guys that were in this field and, hey, how you like it. And, growing up, I grew up actually around here, spent a great deal of time, like second half of my life in South Florida. And coming here, my family was in the military. And so there's always been that draw to become part of it. And I didn't know, which route I wanted to take to be part of it. And this is perfect. It takes both of our passions as far as, my, I guess, respect and love for the military setting, especially the Navy, and, what I've done for the previous 14 years in strength and conditioning. And so that was great to kind of combine those elements. And so when I made the jump from here or to here, it's very, very different. And I mean that in the best way possible, where, you have guys where it's for the most part, it's going to be, regardless of where you are, it's going to be a voluntary program for guys to come in, and regardless of, what branch of the military you're going to be in. And so you have to really do a good job of generating that buy-in. And that's something that, I had to really, really get used to in doing so. Is like I was just familiar with whether it be the collegiate or pro setting, where, okay, guys are going to come in and they're going to do your lift for your, on your program that you program for them. And there's not going to be a whole lot of questions asked, where in this, and the higher up you go, and, guys have done it their way, quote unquote. And, their way is going to be very, very unique to them, depending on what they've come from prior to joining the service. And so, whether it be, with our guys, we have, I would say, about a third coming from like the powerlifting community. That's what they were used to getting involved with. Another third is going to be more or less CrossFit. And then you have a third that's been, well-versed in the athletic population, whether they played a high level sport in high school or a higher level sport in college. So those are going to be the lifting backgrounds that you see mainly, especially the higher up in operations that you go. So getting that buy-in and saying, hey, here's a methodology that might be polar opposite of what you believe, has been, very, very different, especially those first, I'd say, like 4 to 6 months here, where it's like, oh, like he doesn't want to, do this program, and it's all right. I'll see you later, Kyle. Thanks anyway. And so that was a good adjustment and kind of a wake up call where you kind of have to adapt, and you have to really do a good job of building those relationships as you go, and kind of getting a feel for the different level of lifter or lifting competency that you're going to be involved with, as well as their background. So it's a lot more give and take. I think if somebody's coming in from the collegiate or pro or whatever realm into this tactical sphere.
So the thing that I wrote down there was just, I understand that a lot of coaches, if they're in the college world, and now with NLI, it changes everything, but I think NLI is going to get way better, because I'm not sure when anybody's listening to this, but I'm sure you just saw what happened at the University of Iowa with that football player.
With Proctor?
Yeah. Like,
I'm not allowed to say his name, sorry.
No, you're good. You can, I mean, it's in the news, like the kid Proctor from Iowa, like he left Alabama. Essentially, it sounds like he got $100,000 from the collective to come, and then is leaving. I have no idea if he actually got the money, but again, all the reports are out. And to me, the last thing the NCAA is, they don't want to look silly. And right now they look very silly that kids can leave a school, get cash, go back to another school. And so what I think, and what I've been telling my friends and my family is, I think this is going to mark the day where things change, because that can't happen in pro sports, because there's actually rules and things that are happening. So I say all that to say, back in the day when you worked in college, the coach, the strength coach, had power. He had authority. And I've seen an authoritative coach kind of like barking commands at athletes, and like they ruled with fear, for lack of a better term. And when I was working there, I also went and visited a pro team where I'm in the room and I was like, this is completely different. The head strength coach is now literally making the least amount of money and has to be their friend, and has to we're talking about a team that has won multiple Super Bowls, and you got to network, right? For lack of a better term, you got to make them want to do it. and it's a completely different mind shift. And it sounds like that's exactly what you're talking about.
It's very, very similar to that. Yeah, absolutely. And that was
kudos to you though. That's what my point is. Like because love, I'm going to sound, people are going to be like, oh, you big hippie, but like love is such a stronger motivator and emotion to lead with than fear. And that's coming from somebody that has evolved in my coaching career. But anybody listening, like if you're that strength coach, that's like, oh, I'm just going to bark commands and yell at you. And yes, I used to be that guy and I've evolved. But that's not the way to lead. And that's exactly what, like, you can't even do that in your setting. They'd be like, shut up, Kyle. Like they'd say the same thing to me. Like, shut up, Justin. Like
I find my face into the floor real fast.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and that's the thing where I don't understand where American sports have gone so wrong. And I think football in specific is the biggest culprit of it. And I just don't like it. And I want it to get better. Like, I don't like it's just you and Costa and Glenn that has been on the show, like people that have talked about this, like that's how you're supposed to lead. And I guess I'm just rambling to eventually have you, like, what's your then piece of advice to coaches that maybe are leading with fear now? Like, how can you help them lead in that different way, which ultimately is probably more of a true servant leader?
Right. Take a step back, relax, and not everything is going to be, don't take everything personally.
Ooh.
When you get into this fear, even into the pro setting, but especially on this where nobody is forced to do your program. And so when you don't take things personally, you take a step back and create a relationship, or say, hey, here's what I'm seeing with this program and what I'm trying to do with said lift or said, phase, and get their input on it. That's where, a relationship is going to be developed and a connection is going to be made. And so what I've done, and this isn't unique to anything, I think in this setting, is I've created a program request. And so that forces the interaction for me to have with the operator is that, all right, if he's coming in, I have these 4 things that I need you to fill out when we talk about, creating a program. And the 3 are going to be very simple. It's what are your goals? And that can be short-term and long-term. And so that gives them more or less ownership over it. And then obviously it's like the second one is days per week, time per session. The third is where you're going to be lifting, because a lot of times, like, we have a great facility here, but life happens. Some guys just simply don't want to lift here, or their timing wise, it does not work out. Or they're going to be deployed. So what do you have available? Again, giving them ownership over their program. And then the last block I always say is the most essential. And that's going to be, is there any programs that you've done prior where, you were comfortable with and that we can build upon, or I can look at to see, okay, here's where he's been. And then if there are any lifts that you love or hate, that way I don't even have to start the argument of, all right, here's why you should do this. If it's simply going to be a waste of both of our times, that, okay, I'm a big Olympic guy. But if Olympic lifts aren't your thing and you don't want to learn them, then no harm, no foul. Like, we can put other power-based elements in your program that we can attack that way. But if I don't even want to start the argument, of, hey, why? And then I have problems as well on the other side of that coin, where I put an Olympic lift or a complex in, and dude looks at it and is like, I'm not doing that. See you later. And I don't see the guy for 4 to 6 months. So I was like, okay, maybe I want to modify some things. So giving them ownership over the program. So it's that forced interaction has really, I think, been a driving factor into our more or less success. Like, we started with, we started from the ground up. Like, this, where I am now, was non-existent 4 years ago. And now we have, I think this last month in February, 187 guys programs. So, and that's not like, oh, like pound my chest or anything, but that's what it is, right? It's like, hey, we have a great staff here with 2 athletic trainers.
You need CEUs to remain certified. At Strength Coach Network, both of our long-form education courses, Fundamentals 1 and Fundamentals 2, both have 2.0 CEUs to the NSCA in Category C. When you complete the learning and you complete the learning check, you will earn your 2.0 CEUs. That is 33% of the CEUs you need in a 3-year reporting period. Click the link down below to learn more about both courses. Are you or your athletes waking up too hot or too cold in the middle of the night? Or are you looking for a sleep tracker option that doesn't involve wearing a ring or a wrist or a watch, something on your body? Then you need to look no further than the company SleepMe. SleepMe makes chili pads, which keep your bed cold or warm depending on what you want. And they also have a tracker that will go underneath that pad so it will be able to tell how well you slept. When I did a little study on myself with the Aura Ring and with the SleepMe tracker, they were within 97% of each other, and it was actually pretty astonishing how similar the two were. I love my chili pad. It makes me sleep great. I sleep cold. I actually wake up cold now. I haven't woke up warm. And pretty much ever since I've had it, I don't like sleeping on the road because I don't have the ability to use my chili pad. Bunch of former colleagues back at Towson got it. My stepmother got it. Check it out in the link down below. Are you expanding and need more equipment inside your current room? Or are you building a new weight room and you need to get some equipment? You need to look no further than Powerlift. I had Powerlift equipment when I was at Harvard, Iowa, and at the University of Maryland. I'm currently utilizing their stuff right now. I'm telling you, Powerlift strong, Powerlift made here in America, here in the great state of Iowa, made, manufactured. You have the ability for customization, whether it's on the bench, whether it's on the upholstery, whether it's on the bumpers, across the rack. There are countless options, making sure it's designed to your specific brand. It's Powerlift made, it's Powerlift strong, it's not cheap like all the other competitors, and the people inside of Powerlift are people that you want to be with. Check them out in the link down below.
Trainers, a data analysis, and a great program manager. And so we all feed off of each other. So when I get sent guys from coming back from injury and returning to active, then, that's another forced interaction that we can, create that relationship within all three, or, bring our PT in, or four of us. So there's a very much a collaborative effort. And that, again, just builds trust with the guys.
So, you have the high performance model, you have a collaborative model, which the minute you're in one of those, it almost gets rid of the egotistical coach, because you can't be an egotistical coach in a high performance setting, because the high performance manager isn't even supposed to be yelling and barking commands. They're supposed to be facilitating and helping. That's something that Bob Alejo, like one of the OGs of being a high performance manager, said.
Right. No, absolutely. And and that's something I would warn, not on the downside, but just a little bit different in this setting is, like, I'm spoiled and blessed to be, where I am with our team. But, I've heard other stories where, feel out the performance team and what relationships they've had. Because, just through talking with other coaches in this setting where, you might have a very, very different experience where, hey, you might have a performance director or a PT or an athletic trainer that is trying to, take a stranglehold on the program or what you do or will not do. Yeah. So I think that's a very critical piece that, anybody enters this setting, make sure during that interview process, you get a good feel of, what the exact situation is there. Because it's a lot different, like 2 miles down the road on our same base, it operates a lot differently.
Really?
Setting. Yeah. And that can be a good or bad thing, but depending on the proximity to PTs and ATs, we're all in one building, whereas other places, even our own base, they're in different buildings. So that relationship, I feel like, isn't there as well as ours is. And it's good and bad, but it's just different everywhere.
But like you said, that's something that coaches need to know when they're getting into it, to understand, like, what is the proximity. It's no different than, like, when I was at Towson. All right, the athletic training room, the locker room, everything was literally in a different location, like a 10-minute walk away from where I was, versus at Iowa, it was like, oh, the athletic training room across the hall, indoor facility right outside the weight room. Like, it just makes everything different.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And staying on this topic, just continuing on, is the support that you get from your command. So not only is every HP department going to be different, the support and the emphasis put on by whatever command you're associated with is going to be different. Where, ours is, is very supportive and as far as what we're doing. And what we're trying to do. And, a lot of their staff is going to lift with us and they're very hands off. They're like, you guys, know what you're doing. And, you guys just roll and we'll come over and, we'll let us know what you need. And a lot of places, or not a lot of places, but I've heard stories where it's been exactly opposite. It's like, here's what we want. You're going to do this, this, and this. And we're going to tell you what we need. And so find out what the support is, or what I guess organizational structure is for each command that you're about to take that job with.
That's fantastic advice. Switching gears a little bit to one of the questions that I had sent you beforehand, but how do you term functional training versus quote unquote traditional training based on not only your background, IMG, Panthers, Marlins, the Naval Academy now? Like, when I say that, what does it mean to you?
I think if you were asking me like 10 years ago, I think that you would have had a completely different response, because I think 10 years ago, it was very much like that guru-esque kind of feel as far as the terminology goes with functional training, where it was like, all right, you got the bands, the air pad, BOSU balls or whatever. That's what probably, when you and I were,
that's what we were taught for sure.
Right. That was functional. I think it's definitely morphed into the version of having, doing movements, compound-based movements that are going to have that functional aspect or that dynamic correspondence or a carryover to what you're doing outside of the weight room. And so that would, come with anything from core lifts, power-based movements, Olympic lifts, plyos, and general strength work. I would classify all as, put those together as functional training. But if you were asking me like 10 years ago, it would be a completely different answer.
You think it's probably for the better, because I'm trying to wrestle with it too, because having athletic trainers say like, oh, a functional test or functional, I'm just like, it can be used properly, but it can also just get completely bastardized. Like you said, like, oh, just because you did a lunge, like, don't tell me that a lunge is functional assessment for an offensive lineman. Like, especially when you're talking with a coach, like, you just have to be so careful when you talk with coaches. Because I remember a time where we had an athlete returning from a shoulder injury, and the athletic trainer, who was very high up in the org chart, was like, oh, they're at 90%. I was like, really? You say, like, so they can go and practice? He's like, well, no. I was like, you just said somebody's at 90%. And what he meant was they had 90% symmetry when they did an external rotation on a Kaiser. I was like, bro, you can't say that to a sport coach. You have to figure out a new way of assessing the shoulder. So that's where it's like, you just got to be really careful with the words you use, especially to sport coaches. And I'm for sure with you. It's the minute you're dealing with generals and commanders and like, bro.
Oh.
So like, what'd you say, Kyle? Like, I'm going to write this down. Like, go ahead, tell me what you just said again.
Right. And I would say even our guys, especially like we have, where RPT does a great job, where we'll have, especially with like the guys that we know are going to go balls to the wall, all the time, or as many times as they can, where we're going to have direct, conversation with, where terminology cannot be lost. And so here's what you can do. Here's what you cannot do. Here's where you are as far as the progression standpoint. And our other, our other squad is on the West Coast, and he's a great strength coach named Jack McCormick. He says, and I've quoted him on this at least like 80 times, where our guys here are going to drive 100 miles per hour, whether we like it or not. And it's like, it's up to us.
Are you saying go fast, or like literally drive a vehicle 100 miles an hour, or they're going to train hard?
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Okay. Cause like, again, I could see both of those things happening. Like, that's why I wanted to just be crystal clear.
So as far as training wise and lifestyle wise, they're going to go 100 miles per hour, whether you like it or not. And it's going to be up to us to create those guardrails. And so that's where that communication piece, like you said, like going back to that O lineman, where, all right, he's 90%. It's like, no, we will take, or I try to do a very good job of taking the extra like 10 minutes to disclose, all right, here's where you are, here's where we want you, and here's are the exercises that you absolutely cannot do. And so that's where that communication piece with the staff has come a long way. Because, even being here, I've learned that the hard way, where it's like, well, you didn't say I couldn't do, full power cleans. Like, what makes you think that?
When did I say you could?
Right. It's like, I said you couldn't do a clean pull. So why are you thinking that it's okay to do a power clean from the floor? So it's imperative in this setting as well.
And that's just the thing. And the reason that we're having this conversation is that our listeners out there to realize, like, hey, your words have power. And I know I've gotten pushback on the fact that I say I want to get rid of the phrase injury prevention. I think our words are that important. And if you're going to talk with a major in the Navy or the Army or whatever, like, I don't want to go around saying like, oh, I'm going to prevent injury. And then the minute injury happens, I'm like, hey, bro, you said you were going to prevent that. Like, I don't know. That's just why, like, people say like, oh, it's semantics. It's like, is it really? Because I don't think it is, especially in the world of law. Like, especially my father-in-law works in insurance, and I told him that the injury reduction versus injury prevention, and he's like, oh, from a insurance standpoint, like, I see what you're saying.
Right. No, that's a great point. Yeah, and I've heard you say that on a couple other podcasts where you want that word kind of thrown out the window. And
to quote Eric Church, I want to kill a word. If I could kill a word and watch it die, that would be what I try to get rid of.
Absolutely.
How about overtraining versus undertraining in your population? Because, like, you're probably dealing more with the overtrained athlete than somebody that's going to be undertrained. Like, how do you walk that fine line between not overtraining them, but like, you can't burn the cake, but you also have to make sure that the cake is burnt, and then finding the appropriate time? Because what I'm starting to learn with all these tactical coaches that have been coming on is you might literally have like 5 days where your athletes, A, are not with you, B, not eating, C, sleeping on the ground. And It's like everything you did has just been, for lack of a better term, null and void.
Right.
And you got to like get them moving and feeling better again. Like, how do you deal with that overtrain, undertrain thing?
And that's another critical piece when we kind of roll out the educational components that we do with them, and how kind of showing them the benefit of, there are a lot of programs from the outside, and there's a lot of quote unquote like tactical programs that guys will do from the
weight training stuff.
Yeah, weight training stuff, and there's some good programs and good coaches that will do it the online setting. And then there's some stuff that you see where it's like, holy crap. Like, and when we talk about that overtraining, like, that's it right there. But the communication piece is going to be critical, just like, anything in the sports world, where, we can identify in their schedule, areas that they are going to be, at different training trips, where we can, ramp up and pull back at certain locations in their schedule and in their timeline. And having that element added to us to where, okay, hey, you're going to be gone and you're going for 6 weeks. And like you said, might be sleeping on the ground, might be sleeping in a tent, might be sleeping in a 5-star hotel. But regardless, like, we know that your schedule is going to be very much abnormal. And what you're going to be doing operationally is going to be ramped up to full send. And so this is why for these, having that conversation of, this is why we are going to be kind of tapering back for 2 weeks, so you're not absolutely exhausted going into it. So we've had a great 2 or 3 month cycle. However, we're going to need to come down from that, and this is the reason why. And so being able to kind of identify their trips as far as how their schedule ebbs and flows with that, much like you would with the team-based setting. But sometimes they, like you said, sometimes they get pulled on, oh, hey, got to go, overseas, and they get a 12-hour notice. And so it's like, oh crap. And so, yeah, sometimes stuff just happens. And so you just have to be very mindful of it and kind of follow, what the command is doing. And they're very, like I said before, we're very blessed to be in the situation that we are in, where we have full support, and they give us a lot of insight as far as what each component of their schedule or what group is going to be going where, so we can, make modifications for it.
how do you modify, and how do you also track progress in terms of power, strength, speed, and then how do you also measure readiness, recovery with your group of athletes with respect to overtraining and monitoring your athletes?
Yep. Well, we utilize. Are we allowed to say like app-based systems that we use? Okay, I didn't know.
As long as they're TeamBuildr and Hawkin Dynamics.
Oh
no,
not the, but no, nothing.
No, you can say whatever you want. Like, yeah, whatever you use, say whatever you use. I'm biased. These are the people those are companies that I used when I was working in college athletics. Like, it's that simple. So you use whatever you use. I'm biased. You're biased. We're all biased. Let's just talk about whatever you got. Like, go ahead.
So, and I love TeamBuildr too, and use them with 2 other organizations. But right now we use Bridge Athletic, and then that corresponds with our Smartabase. And so we can tie everything in within those 2, as well as our jump assessments that we're going to be doing to display, their readiness. And then on top of that, and we give them other wearables as well that are going to tie into Smartabase. So we can see those trends, positive as well as negative that they're heading. And hey, maybe we need to make a modification because here's where you're in the, quote unquote red for, 4 or 5 of these categories that we're going to be looking for.
I just heard you say the red, and that made me think back when I was at Iowa. We were always like, I think we did a great job of not being like, oh, you're in the red, you're not training today. Like, I think that's a bunch of malarkey, and I don't think we should be doing that.
Right.
Do you see that happening more? I'm not asking you to talk about your coworkers or any specific athlete, but as a general whole, are coaches doing that more and more where it's like, oh, your numbers are down, you can't train? Like, what's the overall feel in terms of that and people that are in the red?
I feel like it used to be like that where, I've been other places where crap, you're in the red, that's a no-go today. But where we can make slight changes to whether that be their volume or intensity and still get a training stimulus is where it's going towards. Because like you just said, where, oh, well, I'm not in the red. Does that mean I can't go and do my own job today? Where, all right, this operation, it does not matter if you're in the red, like you're going to have to go regardless. So I think identifying the trains where we can have more or less a controlled environment throughout their year will help us to program when things are kind of getting ramped up. It's like, okay, this might've been a little bit too intense, or we know that we can be a little bit more intense in this phase and it's fine because he's going to be home for a while. I hope that answers your question, but yeah, so where we know, like, and we are in a controlled environment and he's going to be in the red, it's like, oh, well, that's because he's doing this train, this cycle in the weight room is very hard, as well as, he might be doing something that's a little bit more mentally intensive, as far as his job, and then vice versa. We know he's going to be in the red because operationally he's doing something very challenging, not so much in the weight room. But regardless, if there's, stuff that we can identify to not pull back all the way, but being able to, okay, here's how we can modify and mitigate it going forward. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
No, it does. And I think I think what you just said is awesome because it crosses everything. It crosses our high school coaches, our college ones, our pros, our tactical, and our private sector, because you're doing a great job, in my opinion, of looking at the totality of everything and how anything, stress anywhere affects stress everywhere. And so you can just remove the part talking about being on a mission or being on deploy and replace it with, are they in season? Are they out of season? Like, what's the stress level that they're dealing with? And so any of our listeners out there, like, maybe you need to rewind that and hear what he just said about how you go about navigating that, because I think you do a great job articulating it. And so, like, kudos to you on that.
Thanks. And like we talked about earlier, if I say, hey, we got to pull back the reins a little bit, they have another weight room 400 yards away. So they're just going to go over.
Good talk, Kyle.
All right, cool. I'll see you, bro.
Oh, good talk. It's funny though, because I had to navigate that. And maybe some of our listeners are navigating that right now, where our athletes at Towson, they like more was always better. And like what I tried to get them to understand is like high days got to be high, low days got to be low. Sure, like, but instead of this just like medium vanilla stuff, like let's actually dose it. And so luckily I had a couple athletes that'd be like, listen, I want to train twice. And I'm like, all right, bet. but let's just come up with a plan of what you're going to actually do instead of like, all right, I'm just going to go and do more lunges because we did upper body today. It's like, bro, it's because we're about to max effort velocity sprint and then, max out on trap bar deadlift. Like, I want you to be fresh for that, you slappy. Like, don't go and do something stupid.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, how can you then so anybody listening right now, like, cultivate that relationship and find ways to then be like, hey, all right, you want to train a second time? Word, do this.
Right.
As you you've said you're working at some high level places, right? Like professional sport, military, IMG, which like I said is professional high school, for lack of a better word. What was the moment, like rewind this all for me? Like, when did Kyle realize I want to be a strength coach or I want to work in like, I want to hear your Genesis story. Kind of fill us in on that.
I really think coming out of undergrad, and I interned at IMG for the summer in 2012, way back in the day. And so when I got there and I was able to see, like, because when you go to one college, as an internship, or, you go to one college football program, you're able to see, just one group, how they train. Or, you're lucky enough to do 2 or 3, but most of the time it's with just the same 3 coaches. But when I was at IMG and you're able to see not only, a crap ton of athletes, but also a lot of methodologies and a lot of different coaching styles. And I think not only the methodologies, but the coaching styles is what appealed to me. Whereas like, all right, dude, I'm a 5'7" white guy. I'm not a yeller. and it's still, I've worked with some pretty high level football programs. Right. And so being able to see, how effective different coaching methods could be and to still generate that buy-in and generate coaching success was kind of the pinnacle for my career. So I'd say that was kind of like the genesis of it all.
Sounds like when I was at Harvard, like I was there and I got to see a ton of different sports. Like you talking squash, like I'm like, what's the difference between heavyweight crew and lightweight crew? Like
right.
Water polo, right? Like just being able to see diversity of athlete and diversity of programming. I'm talking about this not to highlight me and detract from you, but I want our listeners to understand, like, go get dirty coaching, like learn what these athletes do. Like when I worked with men's and women's sailing, I got to be their head strength coach for a semester. Like Harvard let me program for them. Talk about an eye-opening experience.
Right. Dude, that's wild.
Yeah, like, you're programming for a group of kids where you're like, what does a sailing team have to do? It's like, well, okay, if you actually watch what they're doing, it's like, dang, A, that's stressful. B, like, probably the stronger you are in like weird positions and like, it's not easy to do once you go and study it. And you're like, just be a student of the game is, I guess, what I'm trying to get to.
Yeah. Did you get to work water polo there, you said?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that awesome?